It started as the kind of Sunday that makes you think life is steady. Then my phone rang, and a stranger told me my wife hadn't been mine in 7 months. Sunday afternoons in suburban Ohio aren't built for impact. They're built for lawnmowers humming 2 houses down, coffee going lukewarm on the table, and pretending the book in your hand is more interesting than it is. I sat in my armchair with a novel I'd been reading for 3 weeks, letting my eyes slide over the same paragraph without registering a single word. Jessica was stretched out on the sofa across the room, scrolling her tablet with the kind of calm you only have when you're convinced the world won't touch you. The house felt steady, ordinary, familiar. Looking back, that's probably why the truth hit the way it did. It had to break through peace to reach me. My phone buzzed on the side table. Unknown number. Normally I would have let it ring out, let voicemail earn its keep. But something made me pick it up. Maybe boredom, maybe instinct, maybe the universe finally losing patience with the lie I'd been living. Daniel Walker? The voice was tight, strained, like someone holding themselves together with both hands. Yeah. Who's this? My name is Michelle Harris. A small pause. A breath. I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt. Jessica kept scrolling. Her foot bounced lightly on the cushion. She had no idea. What's this about? I asked, keeping my voice level. It's about your wife, she said. And my husband, Tyler. The floor didn't drop, it evaporated. For half a second I forgot how to blink. I don't understand, I said, though part of me already did. They've been having an affair, she said plainly. 7 months. I found the messages last night. My fingers tightened around the phone. The room shrank, sharpening around Jessica like a camera lens focusing on a target. She didn't look up. Michelle kept talking. Not in a hysterical rush, but in the steady, clinical tone of someone forcing the truth through a throat gone dry. She told me dates, odd hours, hotel names I recognized from business trips, gaps in Jessica's schedule I'd dismissed as errands, gym nights, coffee with coworkers. Everything Michelle said clicked into place like a lock I never knew was on my life. I stared at Jessica. Same soft sweater, same loose ponytail, same calm, unbothered scrolling. The same woman I'd woken up next to that morning, except now I could feel a stranger underneath her skin. Michelle hesitated. I know you didn't ask for all this, but I thought you deserved to know. I swallowed the dryness in my throat. How long have you known? Since last night, she said. But I think it's been going on longer. The messages I saw were only from the last 7 months. Only 7 months. Just under a year of my life hollowed out without my consent. Why call me? I asked. Because I needed someone else in this mess who wasn't lying. Fair enough. Jessica shifted on the couch, finally glancing my way. I turned slightly, phone pressed to my ear, watching her without expression. She gave me a small smile, relaxed, unaware, almost lazy. It made something in me go still. Michelle's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know I just changed your whole day. She had no idea. She hadn't changed my day. She'd split my life clean down the middle. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. When I hung up, the air in the room felt different. Sharper, thinner, like the walls were waiting for me to say something that would change everything. Jessica blinked at me. Who was that? Her voice was light, casual. The same tone she used when asking if we needed more milk. I studied her for a long, silent second. Not the woman I married, but the woman she'd chosen to be. Then I realized the worst part. This wasn't the moment my marriage ended. It ended 7 months ago. This was just the moment I finally got invited to the truth. The call ended, but the silence it left behind stayed sharp. I sat there with my phone still in my hand, staring at the blank screen like it should have offered me a second chance before everything changed. Across the room, Jessica kept scrolling, her thumb moving in slow, steady arcs. If guilt had a sound, she didn't hear it. My phone buzzed again, a text message. Michelle Harris. I'm sending you everything I have. It's a lot. I'm sorry. Attached was her email address. She wanted mine. My hand shook when I typed it back. Not from fear, not from heartbreak, but from the cold jolt of adrenaline hitting my bloodstream before my mind caught up. When I hit send, my phone felt heavier in my palm, like it already knew what was coming. "Who was calling?" Jessica asked, eyes still on her tablet. Her voice floated across the room like nothing had happened, like the last 10 minutes hadn't carved a fault line straight through our house. "Wrong number," I said evenly. The lie sat between us like a loaded box I refused to open yet. My inbox pinged. New email. From Michelle Harris, evidence. The subject line alone tightened something in my chest. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just stared at it, letting the reality settle in piece by piece. Michelle wasn't done. My phone buzzed again, another message. "Michelle, Daniel, you need to know this isn't just about Tyler." I didn't say it on the phone, but there are others. At least 2 more men. My jaw locked. My pulse didn't spike. It flattened, turned calm and cold. 2 more. 3 men total. 7 months with one. Weeks or months with others. My wife, who was still sitting 10 feet away from me, casually scrolling like her hands weren't covered in the fingerprints of other lives. My reply was short. "Daniel, send everything." I put the phone down, leaned back in the chair, and took a breath that felt like it didn't belong to me. Jessica finally looked up, sensing something. Her eyes narrowed just a touch. "You okay?" "Fine," I said. Not angry, not broken, just awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I glanced at the email again. The temptation to open it right there was strong, but I didn't want to read a single line of it with her in the room breathing the same air. I wanted facts, not commentary. Proof, not excuses. Michelle sent another message. "Michelle, there are screenshots, timelines, receipts, hotel records, and the investigator's report. I know it's a lot. I'll answer anything when you're ready. Private investigator." 7 months wasn't suspicion, it was a case file. I felt the weight of everything tightening around me, not like a trap, but like a grip I could finally feel instead of ignoring. Jessica sat up a little straighter. "You're quiet," she said. "So are you," I answered. She frowned. "Daniel, what's going on?" "Everything. Nothing. All at once." I stood, slow and controlled. My head felt clear, sharper than it had in years. My life wasn't collapsing. It was being reorganized without my permission. "I need some air," I said. I walked to the kitchen, phone in hand, and stared out the window at the quiet street. Kids' bikes on driveways. A dog asleep under a maple tree. The kind of peace that mocked the truth sitting in my inbox. When I finally opened Michelle's email, the preview alone told me the world I'd known was gone. But the full impact, that would come next. And Jessica still had no idea the ground beneath her was already giving way. I didn't ease into it. There's no clean way to hand someone the truth they built their lies on. I walked back into the living room and stood in front of the couch. Jessica looked up at me, eyebrows lifted, tablet resting on her knee. "What's going on?" she asked. "Tyler's wife called me," I said. The words hit her like a flash grenade. Her face froze halfway between a smile and a frown. Confusion hit first, then recognition, then something behind her eyes snapped into alarm. What?" she stammered, sitting up fast. "What are you talking about? Why would she?" She told me everything. Her mouth opened, then closed. Panic flickered through her expression like bad lighting. Shock, fear, calculation, all trying to take the wheel at once. "She's lying," Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. "She's unstable. Tyler told me she's been paranoid for months." "Is that so?" I said calmly. Jessica stood up, hands shaking as she tried to grab my arms. "Daniel, please. Let's talk about this." "We're talking now." Her breath hitched. She pulled her hands back slowly, like she just reached for something hot. "What exactly did she tell you?" 7 months, I said. "Hotels. His apartment. Days you said you were at the gym. Nights you said you were with coworkers. And that's just the part about Tyler." Jessica's knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the couch. "That's not. You're not listening. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. My voice stayed level, almost quiet. Michelle has dates. Records. She hired a private investigator. Jessica's eyes widened, and I watched the last of her denials drain out of her face. She said there were others, I added. At least 2 more men. Jessica pressed her hands to her forehead like she could push the truth out through her skull. I was lonely, she whispered. You were distant, Daniel. You were always working. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I didn't flinch. Her excuses passed over me like wind over stone. This isn't about loneliness, I said. This is about choices. I messed up, she said, voice cracking. I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving. Don't, I cut in. That word doesn't belong here. Her eyes filled, but I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak. Just clarity so sharp it felt like strength. She paced the room like she was trapped inside it. Daniel, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll tell you everything. I'll be honest, You had 7 months to be honest. She stopped moving. She looked smaller. Not physically, just reduced. Like the person I thought she had peeled off her and fallen on the floor. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. You already did. Jessica's breath came fast, like she was bracing for impact. Can we just sit down? Just talk like normal? Please. There's nothing normal here. Her tears finally broke, but they didn't move me. Not because I'd hardened, because the part of me she could reach was already gone. A long, shaky silence settled between us. Jessica pressed her palms together like she was praying for a script that wouldn't come. Daniel, she said quietly, do you hate me? No, I said. I don't feel anything for you right now, and that should tell you everything. Jessica sank back onto the couch, shoulders collapsing inward. I watched her. Not as my wife, not as someone I loved, but as someone whose choices had rewritten the entire story of my life. I didn't shout. I didn't break anything. I didn't storm out. I just stood there, calm and steady, while the marriage she'd been staging finally stopped pretending. The house felt colder when I sat down at my laptop. Not physically, just different. Like the walls were waiting for a verdict. Jessica hovered behind me, arms wrapped around herself, breath uneven. She didn't speak. She knew whatever came next wasn't going to let her talk her way out. I opened my inbox. Michelle's email sat at the top like a sealed envelope in a courtroom. Subject line, evidence attached. Please read carefully. I clicked it. The email opened with a block of text from Michelle. Apologetic, steady, and painfully thorough. Below it were the attachments, lined up in a neat row. Screenshots, photos, receipts, timelines, call logs, and the full PI report. Jessica saw the list and gasped like the air had been struck out of her. Daniel, please, she whispered, but I lifted a hand and she went silent. I opened the first attachment. It was an image of a message thread, nothing graphic, nothing explicit, just tone. The tone of 2 people who were too comfortable, too familiar, too used to talking behind someone else's back. I didn't react. I didn't blink. The next file held photos of hotel receipts with dates that matched nights Jessica said she was at late meetings. The timestamps lined up with my own schedule. Nights she knew I'd be home late. Nights she knew I wouldn't question anything. Jessica covered her mouth with her hands. I swear, I never meant for. I didn't think she'd ever. That's clear, I said. You didn't think you'd get caught. More files. More proof. Her voice behind me was a faint, frantic tremor. Daniel, that's not the full story, please. There were reasons. Reasons don't erase facts. The next attachment hit harder. Screenshots of messages where my name appeared. Not descriptively. Not neutrally. Mockingly. One line from Jessica burned hotter than the others. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how boring he is. My jaw tightened for the first time since this started. Not from pain, from clarity. Behind me, Jessica broke. I didn't mean that. I was angry that day. I was venting. He pushed me into. Stop. She froze like the words struck her spine. I kept scrolling, steady, unmoved. More messages. More casual betrayal. More evidence of a life she was living outside the one she shared with me. The PI report was last. Dates. Locations. Patterns. 12 pages of the life I hadn't been living but had still been paying for, emotionally and financially. Jessica started crying hard, the kind of crying meant to get a reaction. I gave her none. When I closed the last file, the room went silent. Not just quiet, but hollow, like everything inside it had been emptied out. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. That word again. Sorry. A bandage she'd worn thin. I stood up and faced her. "Everything you said about love," I told her. "None of it matches what you did when you thought I'd never know. Not one piece." She shook her head like she was trying to shake reality loose. "Daniel, please. I can change. I'll do anything. We can fix this, we can." "There's no we in this anymore." Her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, sobbing, reaching for me. I stepped back out of reach. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I was just done. The evidence didn't break me, clarified me. Everything after this moment would be clean, decisive, and on my terms. The living room still smelled like the coffee we never finished. The laptop was closed, the evidence sealed inside it, but the truth lingered in the air like smoke. Jessica sat on the floor where she'd collapsed, hands shaking, tears streaking her face. I stood a few feet away, steady, breathing slow. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. We can fix it. We can rebuild." "We," I said quietly. "There hasn't been a we for a long time." She broke into another round of sobs, rocking slightly like she could cry her way back to the version of herself she wanted me to believe in. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I let the silence answer her. Minutes passed before she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Just tell me what you want me to do. I'll do anything." That was the moment something inside me settled. Not anger, just certainty. "Pack a bag," I said. "You're leaving tonight." Jessica's face twisted like she'd been hit. "What? No, Daniel, please. I can't. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." She crawled toward me on her knees before catching herself, getting up halfway, wiping at her face like she could reset the moment. "I made mistakes, but you can't just throw me out." "You threw yourself out," I said. "I'm just acknowledging it." She shook her head violently. "No, I'm your wife. No. You stopped being that the first time you lied." Her breathing quickened into sharp, panicked bursts. "Please don't do this. Please don't give up on me." "I'm giving up on what you pretended to be," I said. "Not on myself." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. And maybe she didn't. The version of me she'd built her double life around was gone. "I'm calling my brother," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm not being alone with you while you pack." "That's cruel," she whispered. "It's necessary." She sank onto the couch, defeated. While the phone rang, she covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I watched her, calm, distant, already stepping out of the life we'd shared. My brother answered. "I need you to come over," I said simply. "Now." He didn't ask why. He just said, "I'm on my way." When he arrived, Jessica was upstairs zipping a small overnight bag, the sound echoing down the staircase like the closing of a chapter. She came down minutes later, face blotched, gripping the bag like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. She walked past me to the door. For a second, she hesitated. One last reach for the life she'd burned. But I didn't speak. She stepped out. The door closed. The silence that filled the house wasn't empty. It was clean. It was the first breath of air that belonged to me alone. I filed for divorce at 8:03 a.m. on Monday. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. Exactly the kind of place you go to end something that once felt permanent. The clerk slid the paperwork across the counter without emotion. And for the first time since Michelle's call, I felt like a man moving forward instead of standing still. My attorney, Harris, was a calm, older guy with the kind of tired eyes that come from seeing the same story on repeat. When I told him the situation, he didn't look surprised. "These cases aren't rare," he said. "What matters is the evidence and how we leverage it." He meant business. I appreciated that. Over the next few days, the investigation started widening. Michelle's PI shared the full report with Harris, and that opened more doors than I expected. Ones I didn't even know existed. For affair partners. Not one. Not three. For 12 months of overlapping lies, coordinated around my work schedule, her girls' nights, and a handful of so-called conferences that never made sense to me, but I didn't question because trust makes you blind in a way you don't notice until it's gone. I didn't get angry. I didn't break. I just took notes. Harris read through the files with a quiet frown. "Your wife was busy," he said carefully. "Apparently," I replied. What hit hardest wasn't the number of men. It was the precision, the planning, the ease with which she had managed an entire second life while sitting across from me at dinner like nothing had changed. But the worst part came in a separate envelope. "Financials," Harris said, sliding it across the desk. I opened it. A secret credit card in her name, but using our shared address. $18,000 in charges. Hotels, restaurants, gifts, travel, rideshare apps. Even a few charges on days I was out of town. Timing she used to her advantage, not mine. Money I'd saved for a future home. For us. Or at least the us I thought existed. I let the numbers sit in front of me for a long moment. No emotion, no panic, just calculation. "That money gone?" I asked. "We can argue dissipation of marital assets," Harris said. "Judges don't like secret spending tied to affairs. We'll push for reimbursement." "Good. Her lawyer will probably claim emotional neglect or marital dissatisfaction." I almost laughed. "Let them try." Harris tapped the PI report with his pen. "Judges don't buy excuses when the evidence shows planning. This wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. Deliberate. The word fit too well. Later that afternoon, Jessica's lawyer sent over their first official response. The document tried to glaze over her actions, downplaying the affairs, shifting blame toward my work schedule. Classic deflection. Predictable. Weak. I told Harris, "We keep everything factual." "Always," he said. The next hearing was quiet and procedural, but I watched Jessica closely. She avoided eye contact. She looked smaller than she used to. Not physically, just stripped of whatever image she'd built for herself. When the judge reviewed the PI report, she stopped halfway through and glanced over her glasses at Jessica. "This is extensive," the judge said. Jessica's lawyer tried to recover, but the judge held up a hand. "Emotional neglect doesn't justify coordinated deception," she said plainly. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't need volume. By the time the hearing adjourned, the path forward was clear. The financial damage was documented. The affairs were proven. The judge wasn't buying her narrative. I walked out of the courthouse with a calm I hadn't felt in months. The life I'd thought I had was gone. But the one I was building didn't depend on anyone else's lies. The full truth was ugly. But it was mine now, and knowing it meant I could finally move on my terms. 8 months. That's how long it took for the divorce to grind from paperwork to signatures to silence. Most of it was procedural, but betrayal has a way of echoing through every line of every document. Jessica's attorney tried to posture at first, talk of emotional disconnect, marital dissatisfaction, the strains of modern life, but all of it collapsed under the PI report and the financial records. Facts have weight. Excuses don't. The judge ultimately sided with reason. Jessica got far less than she wanted. Less alimony, fewer assets, and no credibility left to leverage. I kept the house until it sold. I kept my retirement accounts. I kept my dignity, which wasn't part of the legal settlement but felt like the biggest win. Jessica walked out of the courthouse that day looking exhausted, like the fight she imagined she'd win had never even started. She didn't look at me, not out of anger, out of recognition. She finally saw the distance between the man she betrayed and the man she thought she could negotiate with. Her fallout started immediately. Tyler divorced Michelle not long after the evidence surfaced. Michelle rebuilt her life with quiet strength. Tyler tried to maintain whatever illusion he thought he had with Jessica, but relationships born in the dark don't survive daylight. They lasted a few weeks, long enough for the thrill to fade and the reality to set in. Mutual dishonesty doesn't build anything solid. Friends who'd once hovered around Jessica drifted away, some out of discomfort, some out of judgment, some because they'd unknowingly been pulled into her web of lies and didn't want to be part of it anymore. I didn't celebrate any of it. I didn't take pleasure in her collapse. That's not strength, that's noise. And I'd had enough noise. My own life didn't magically become peaceful. I moved into a small rental house on the edge of town. Plain, quiet, clean. The kind of place where you can hear your thoughts again. The kind of place where nothing reminds you of what someone else took from you. I built new routines. Woke up early. Went for long drives. Cooked simple meals. Cleaned the place more than it needed. There's something grounding about order when your life's been chaos. Therapy helped too. Not the dramatic kind. Just someone who asked the right questions at the right time and reminded me that betrayal doesn't make you weak. It just exposes where you were giving too much trust to someone who didn't earn it. There were nights the house felt too quiet. Nights where the weight of everything hit without warning. But even those moments felt cleaner than the lies I'd lived with before. Pain is at least honest. Silence is honest. Starting over is honest. 8 months after filing, the judge signed the final decree. Just like that, the story we'd been pretending was a marriage became a closed file. I walked out of the courthouse into a cold, bright morning. The air felt sharper, lighter, like stepping into a new season. Not because life was suddenly perfect, but because it was finally real. Jessica's world was behind me. Mine was directly in front of me. And for the first time since the phone rang that Sunday, I felt like I'd stopped falling. In the 2 years after the divorce, my life didn't reinvent itself. It rebuilt itself, piece by piece, quietly, steadily. The rental house eventually became a home. Not big, not flashy, not something meant to impress anyone. Just mine. A clean kitchen, a solid desk, a bed I actually slept in, a backyard big enough for weekend mornings and a chair I could drag out into the sun. I learned routines that didn't revolve around damage control. Mornings at the gym, evenings cooking simple meals, weekends spent fixing things around the house that didn't really need fixing, but gave me something solid to put my hands on. The scars didn't vanish. They just stopped running the show. Work got better too. When your personal life stops draining you, you show up differently. Stronger, sharper. My boss noticed. Promotions followed. Nothing flashy, just the kind of upward movement that comes when a man finally has both feet on the ground. And slowly, life opened up again. I met Rachel through a coworker. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She'd been through her own betrayal, different details, same wound. That gave us an understanding that didn't need long explanations. Our